It all began about a year after I married Oscar Higgins. Oscar was twice my age, but his bank account showed 6 figures, so I made a play for him. Finally, I got him to propose to me, and I gladly accepted. I didn't love him. I was only interested in security. Then it happened. As I said, it was about a year after he brought me to his isolated house. Oscar had a heart attack. "Will he be all right, doctor?" I asked. "Can't say for sure, Frida," the doctor replied. "I've done all I can. We can only wait and see. Honestly, he should be in a hospital, but I'm afraid moving him into town over those bad roads might kill him." Oscar had always had a bad heart, one of the reasons I married him. I figured he might die at any moment, and then his money would be mine. Although I acted upset, I sincerely hoped he wouldn't survive. "How is he today, doctor?" "Bad news, Frida. It's going to be pretty tough on you from now on," he said, his face dark with concern. I felt panicked. Something was wrong, but what? "Tough? I don't understand," I said. "Your husband's heart attack left him completely paralyzed, Frida. He has absolutely no control over his muscles. He'll be bedridden for the rest of his life." At first, I was shocked, but as the days passed, I fully realized what Oscar's condition meant for me. He was like a baby, completely helpless. Oscar couldn't even talk to tell me what he wanted or needed. All he could do was open his mouth and choke out guttural sounds. "Just a minute, Oscar," I'd say, trying to guess. He had no friends, and living in that isolated house didn't help. There were no neighbors for miles. I had no one to talk to. I was alone with my darling, helpless husband. "I'm sorry, Oscar. I don't understand you." Oscar could hear me, but if he needed something, I had to run down a list until I guessed right. "Are you thirsty, Oscar? Sleepy? Hungry?" I couldn't leave him, not even for an hour. Once a week, I rushed into town to shop. When I returned, I'd usually have to clean him up. Oh Lord, how much more can I stand? I became his full-time nurse. I had to wash him, shave him, feed him. "Keep it in your mouth, you blabbering idiot!" I'd snap. Living with him was like living with an imbecile. It went on like that for a year. I thought I would lose my mind. "Why don't you die already? Why do you go on living day after day? Do you hear me? Die!" I screamed. Finally, I reached my breaking point. "I'm going out," I declared. "I haven't seen a movie since you got sick." "Well, I'm going tonight." He stared at me with those wide, pleading eyes. "You've been fed. You can last until I get back. Goodbye." That night, I drove into town and went to a movie. I felt a little better afterward. It did me good to get away from that isolated house. Except for occasional shopping trips, I had been cooped up there like a prisoner. "How were you while I was gone? All right? Well, get used to it, Buster. I'm going to do this often from now on." I leaned over him, tormenting him. "Maybe one night I'll go away and not come back. What would happen to you then, huh? You'd starve. You couldn't even get yourself a drink of water. You'd starve to death." Then, on one of those frequent escapes into town, I met Rick. He was big and handsome, and I was lonely. "There's a roadhouse a couple of miles out. We could dance a little," he suggested. "I'm willing. Let's go, Rick," I said. I saw Rick often. At first, it was just for laughs, but after a few dates, it got serious. "I love you, Frida. I need you," he said. "Oh, Rick, kiss me," I whispered. One night, I told Rick all about Oscar. He was angry with me for not telling him sooner. "You should have told me you were married, Frida," he said. "I was afraid, Rick," I replied. "I was afraid you wouldn't want to see me if you knew." After a while, he cooled off. "What are we going to do, honey?" he asked. "I can't divorce him, Rick. It would mean giving up his money," I said. "If he were to die, it would all be mine. Every cent. But I love you, Frida. I want to marry you." "Be patient, Rick, be patient. How long can he go on living like that?" And then the doctor told me the truth. "Your husband could live to a ripe old age with the kind of wonderful care he gets from you, Frida." I made up my mind. "We have to kill him, Rick. It's the only way." "No, Frida, not murder. It'll be easy, darling. It will look like an unfortunate accident. I have a plan." "All right," he said. "Let's hear it." The following day, a couple of men came to the house. "We're from the Ajax Construction Company." "Oh yes, come in," I said. I took them down into the cellar. "Right here. I want bars on every window. I'm so afraid of burglars and my husband is helpless." "Okay, lady, we got it," one of them said. "Come on, Rob, let's get to work." Next, I had them remove the old cellar door and replace it with a big, thick one. I'd like a snap lock installed, I added, so it locks by itself. Anything you say, lady. Finally, they put up some shelves. I want to store canned goods down here, sort of a pantry, I explained. Everything was set. I stocked the cellar pantry with canned meats, vegetables, and fruit juices. Later, Rick came over. Oscar just stared at us with his expressionless eyes, his mouth dribbling. You've got to help me clear the cellar of any tools Oscar might use to escape, I told Rick. Yeah, I get it, Frida, he said. Rick broke a couple of cellar windows and damaged the thick door to make it look realistic. Meanwhile, Oscar, the poor, slobbering fool, tried to figure out what was going on. The man who comes to read the electric meter in the cellar will be here in 3 weeks, I explained. He'll let me out. If I don't hear from you by then, come yourself. Rick kissed me right there in front of paralyzed, helpless Oscar. I thought Oscar's eyes would pop right out of his head. See you, Rick. Bye, honey, he said. After Rick left, I turned to my bedridden husband and mocked him. A terrible accident is going to happen now, Oscar. I'm going to get locked in the cellar, and you're going to starve to death. I went down into the cellar. The great, big new door clicked shut behind me, its snap lock sealing me in. I could hear Oscar's faint, guttural cries beyond it. I settled in for the long stay. Upstairs, as the days passed, Oscar's eerie, blood-curdling yells grew weaker and weaker. 4 days. 4 days without food or water. He ought to be dead by now. Finally, Oscar's howling stopped. Silence closed in. Meanwhile, I was living off the canned goods I had stored in the cellar. Cold meat wasn't gourmet, but it was better than nothing. After 3 weeks of waiting, growing more nervous each day, I heard the doorbell upstairs. Electric meter reader! Anybody home? Help! Help! I screamed, doing my best to act hysterical. When the meter reader let me out, I bawled like a baby. I've been locked in! My husband! My husband! Your husband is dead, lady. The police listened to my story. The door locked behind me. I couldn't get out. I was trapped. How come you had the windows barred, lady? They asked. I was afraid. My husband was helpless, and I was afraid of prowlers. I had the snap lock put on in case I forgot to lock it, but it locked me in. Take it easy, lady. I wept and wailed. I tried to escape. I yelled and screamed until I was hoarse. Poor Oscar. He was so helpless. It wasn't your fault, ma'am. It was an accident. You couldn't help it. The case was closed, and I was cleared. I cleaned out the cellar, replaced the broken windows, and locked it for good. I never wanted to go down there again. It would be a long time before I could forget those 3 weeks, listening to Oscar's fading cries as he slowly starved to death. Later, a lawyer handled my husband's estate. Since your husband left no will, Mrs. Higgins, it will take several months before the proceeds can be turned over to you. Do your best, Mr. Davidson. Rick and I met soon after it was all over. Everything was proper and raised no suspicion. Frida Higgins, this is Rick Lairdale. How do you do? Glad to meet you, Frida, Rick said. Rick was anxious to marry me, but I cautioned him. We've got to wait, Rick. People might talk. Okay, Frida, anything you say. Meanwhile, Mr. Davidson worked to settle Oscar's estate. Months passed. Finally, Rick and I were married. We stayed at the house. I hate this place, Rick. As soon as everything is settled, we'll sell it. Okay with me, he said. Then I got a call from New York. My lawyer needed me there to finalize the estate. I'll go with you, Frida. No, Rick, that wouldn't look right. I'd better go alone. I was gone for almost 4 days. When I returned, I called out, Rick, I'm home. Rick? I found him in the cellar, unconscious. His fists were bloody and raw from pounding on the door. He must have been searching for the canned goods I had removed. The door had locked behind him. He was almost dead from lack of food and water. My darling? My darling? I nursed Rick back to health, but something had happened to him while he was imprisoned in the cellar. His mind had snapped. He couldn't talk, couldn't move. He was paralyzed. He just lay there, staring. He was like a helpless baby. I had to feed him, wash him, shave him. He was completely out of his mind, a babbling idiot. Oscar, at least, could understand me when I spoke. The caravan plodded on, silhouetted against a sky still burning with the fire of a setting sun. Perched atop their camels, 3 Americans looked anxiously ahead, across the darkening sand dunes to their destination, the Pyramid of Khafra. Professor Burton stirred in his saddle and sighed tiredly. Well, there it is. We're almost to the end of our journey. It's a good thing, too. I'm getting a bit saddle sore, and I can't wait to find out why our first expedition disappeared. Professor Burton fell silent again. It had been many years since he had last been in the Nile Valley, and though this return elated him, he felt very perturbed at the cause of his return, the mysterious disappearance of the previous expedition. Professor, isn't that the famous Sphinx I've read so much about? Eh? Oh, yes, Miss Allen, that's the Sphinx of Giza. Melody Allen was a journalist, and the professor knew that she was hoping for more facts for her story. He turned to face the lovely woman. This Sphinx, Miss Allen, was carved from solid rock nearly 5,000 years ago. Its head is a portrait of King Khafra, whose tomb rests in that pyramid just ahead of us. This entire area is really a huge burial ground, and this Sphinx stands like a sentinel, guarding the tombs. The Egyptians tell fantastic stories about the Sphinx. Its surface has been worn away by the ravages of time, leaving a very strange, inscrutable expression, which has caused the Arabs to call it the Father of Terror. How weird! The caravan continued past the ever-silent Sphinx and came to a halt before the huge pyramid. Well, here we are. Perhaps we'll soon know what has happened to the first expedition. Do you have any idea why they all so suddenly vanished, Professor? The Egyptians took great pains to protect their dead, Miss Allen. They built this great pyramid as a tomb for King Khafra, then honeycombed it with secret passages and false burial chambers to mislead anyone who entered. We know from messages they sent us that the first group was on the verge of a monumental discovery. I believe they had stumbled upon a secret chamber or passageway that would lead them to the real tomb of King Khafra, and I think they must have become lost in the labyrinths. But that was months ago. How? How could they live? I hardly think we'll find them alive, Miss Allen, if we find them at all. Oh! Professor Burton turned and warily mounted the stone slab steps that led to the pyramid entrance. The others, in single file, followed close behind. We'll make a cursory examination of the interior while it's still light. It's just possible that we'll find something. Good idea. We can set up camp later. Their way illuminated by lamps, the small group muddled through a maze of passages and chambers, down long flights of narrow stairs filled with the stale, musty odor of air befouled by ages past. Haven't we gone far enough? We might get lost. Perhaps you're right. We'll rest here a moment, then make our way back to set up camp. I was hoping we'd find some clue to their disappearance. This place is like an oven, so hard to breathe. Maybe tomorrow we'll have better luck when we're rested. Professor, one of the Arabs just found something. Come quickly. Hurriedly, they scrambled through the narrow passageway. Good heavens, it's a secret panel. Maybe the first group found this too. Come on, we must find out. Lead the way, Abe. The little Arab cautiously entered the secret passage, followed by the others until all were inside. The professor shone his lamp around to discern the nature of it. Why, this passage is even narrower than the one we just... Professor, the panel is closing. We've got to stop it. In a group, they hurled themselves at the massive stone panel to prevent its closing to no avail. It's closed! We're locked in. My God. Good Lord, it's Arby. He's dead. What happened to him? I should have known. I should have known this passageway would have a booby trap. The Egyptians often guarded these passages with ingenious devices designed to kill anyone who enters. This one had a wicked scythe-like blade that would raise out of sight when the panel was opened, and after the person was inside, the panel would close, releasing the blade. What are we going to do? Professor Burton pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his beaded brow. I'm afraid we have no choice. We can't get out the way we entered. We must go forward. I guess you're right. Slowly, they inched their way through the passageway. Sweat soaked their bodies. Their breaths came in short, labored gasps. My God, what's that? I don't know. We're all here. No, wait, Ali is missing. Again, they hurried back through the tunnel until suddenly, look, on the ground, a pool of blood. But where's Ali? He's gone. He's disappeared. Professor, I'm frightened. Please get us out of here. Yeah, it's your fault. You got us into this, and I don't like it one bit. Please, we must be calm. Our only hope is to find another exit. For long minutes, they moved slowly onward. The passageway became wider, but the oppressive heat and shortage of air weakened them greatly. Look, steps going down. We'll have to go single file. Be careful. Preceded by the light of his lamp, the professor warily edged down the steeply inclined stairs. He felt Melody Allen's fingers gripping his shoulder tightly, trembling, down, deeper and deeper. Won't these stairs ever end? So tired. Wait, Professor, wait for Hassan! He had to rest. The shocking, blood-curdling scream froze them to the spot. For a moment, only the sound of their heavy breathing could be heard in the oppressive silence. They stared into one another's eyes. Then, without a word, they clambered back up the long stairs, knowing it was too late, knowing full well just what they would find. A pool of blood and no body. We're going to die. We'll all be killed. We'll all die, one by one. Well, nothing's going to kill me. I'm not going any further. I'm going back. I'm getting out. No, come back. You'll get lost. We must stay together. Come back. Let him go. Don't chase him. He has no light. He won't be able to see. You're right, he'll be back. Stay here, with me. I'm frightened. Just don't leave me. Professor Burton slumped weakly to the stone floor beside the sobbing girl. He cradled his head on his arms and stifled a cry of anguish. The lack of air caused his head to pound and his chest to ache. They waited in silence. They waited, listening, hoping, praying. Time stretched endlessly, each second feeling eternal. Suddenly, echoing through the ancient passages of the pyramid, an agonized scream split the silence. Neither moved. They both knew it was hopeless. Their strength had become too precious to waste on a dead man they would never find. There's someone in here with us, I feel it. Those deaths weren't accidents. Someone removed the bodies. Who is it, Professor? Who is it? I don't know. I've been thinking the same thing. Someone or something is deliberately trying to kill us. But it's so fantastic. I can't believe it. Melody Allen struggled to raise herself. You said something. What? There's a legend about the Sphinx. They say that ages ago, a way was found to crossbreed a lion with a human, and the creature that developed lived for thousands of years. They say the Sphinx actually lived. They stumbled down the long flight of steps and along a dark corridor. But it was a vicious creature, and so terribly powerful as to defy description. And because there was no other use for it, they supposedly locked it in this pyramid to guard King Khafra's tomb. Nonsense! Probably some member of the first expedition hiding here, killing us. Hiding all the bodies. Hadn't thought of that. Maybe they found great wealth? Maybe someone became greedy? Yes! The professor's voice trailed off into the darkness. Before them stood an open door. Professor, be careful. Don't go in there. But this is it, Miss Allen. Behind this door lies the answer. I'm sure of it. We found King Khafra's real tomb. Together, they stepped through the doorway. Ah, I knew it! The mummy that was removed from this pyramid by our museum years ago was not the real King Khafra. This is the outer chamber to his tomb. There must be a secret panel. Professor, there it is. Over there. It's open. On hands and knees, they crawled slowly, nervously, under the hinged stone slab. They huddled together by the entrance, their bodies quivering with fear and expectancy, their hearts pounding. Professor! What is it? Where are we? What's in here? I was right. This is the authentic tomb of King Khafra. Look, Miss Allen. We've found it. Look at the wealth in here. Diamonds, rubies, silver, gold, a fortune. You were right, Miss Allen. Some member of the first expedition must have let this go to his head. He obviously wanted to keep it all for himself. I see it all now. My God. I wouldn't have believed this if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. These pearls are exquisite. I never thought there was this much treasure in the whole world. Magnificent. The workmanship is superb. And these hieroglyphics, I wonder if I can decipher them. A woman would sell her soul for such beautiful jewels. Let's see, in the 13th dynasty. This is easier than I thought. There came into being. Good Lord, it's true. The legend is true. What? What legend? What are you talking about? The legend of the Sphinx. The Sphinx lived. It says so on the wall. What of it? After all these years, surely you don't. They turned and stared in the direction of the sound. In the yellow light of the lamp, they saw a monstrous creature enter through the opening in the wall, a creature with the body of a huge lion and the withered, age-old head of a man. The girl slumped to the floor, and Professor Burton had time to emit one short, petrified scream before the Sphinx leapt. Beneath the crumbling ruins of an ancient Egyptian temple, a group of explorers uncovered a hidden chamber. The air was thick with the weight of centuries, the oppressive silence broken only by the sound of their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. At the heart of the room, under the glow of a solitary beam of moonlight that pierced through a crack in the ceiling, stood a towering skeletal structure. Suspended in its frame was a muscular figure, its body carved from stone, bound by chains to the triangular frame. A crude mask of iron obscured its face, giving the impression that it was a guardian or a prisoner. Hieroglyphs lined the walls, their meanings long lost to all but the most dedicated scholars. One of the explorers, Dr. Adrian Malik, ran her fingers across the inscriptions. "This figure," she murmured, her voice barely audible in the cavernous space, "was condemned by the gods, a sentinel cursed to stand watch over the treasures of the dead for eternity." The team approached the figure with caution. The ground beneath it was littered with shards of stone and ancient debris. One of them, a bold young adventurer named Mark, reached for a golden amulet lying in the rubble near the sentinel's feet. The moment his hand made contact with the relic, the chamber shook violently. Dust cascaded from the ceiling, and a deep, guttural growl reverberated through the air. The eyes of the stone figure flared with an eerie, unnatural light. "It wasn't a statue," Adrian gasped. "It's him, the bound sentinel, alive." The sentinel's chains rattled, and one by one they snapped. The figure's massive limbs stretched, the stone cracking and falling away to reveal sinewy flesh beneath. With an unearthly roar, it lunged forward, dragging the remnants of its broken frame. The mask obscuring its face seemed to amplify its rage, its hollow mouthpiece emitting a sound that froze the blood in their veins. The explorers scrambled for the exit, but the chamber's entrance had collapsed, trapping them inside with the awakened sentinel. Adrian frantically deciphered the hieroglyphs, searching for a way to stop the creature. "He was bound by a curse," she yelled, "to protect the treasures of the pharaoh from the greedy. He only awakens when the sacred relics are disturbed." Mark, clutching the amulet, realized his mistake. "I'll put it back," he shouted, tossing it toward the pile of treasures scattered beneath Sentinel. But the creature was relentless, its movements fueled by centuries of fury. It struck the ground with such force that the floor cracked, revealing a chasm below filled with jagged spikes and shadows that seemed to writhe with malevolent intent. Desperate, Adrian shouted an incantation inscribed on the wall. The sentinel paused, its form shuddering as the words resonated through the chamber. The light in its eyes flickered and it seemed to hesitate. But the spell required a sacrifice. To seal the curse, a life must be given willingly, Adrian whispered, tears streaming down her face. Before anyone could react, Adrian stepped forward. "Go," she told the others. "Tell the world what we found." The sentinel roared once more, its chains reappearing as it reached for Adrian. The others watched in horror as she was bound in its place, her body encased in stone. The chamber fell silent, the curse restored, and the sentinel returned to its eternal slumber. When the survivors finally escaped, they swore never to speak of what had transpired. But beneath the sands of Egypt in the cursed chamber, Adrian's stone figure now stands in eternal vigil, her fate intertwined with the treasures she sought to uncover. the cursed arena of Silvanus. Deep in the Roman province of Hispania, hidden within a forest sacred to the god Silvanus, lay an abandoned gladiatorial arena. Legends spoke of the place as cursed, a ground where blood was spilled not for glory, but for a god's wrath. The arena had fallen into ruin, yet its power lingered, whispering its dark tale to those brave or foolish enough to listen. Lucius Marcellus, a young Roman officer, was tasked with leading his cohort through the forest to investigate the disappearance of travelers. As night fell, they stumbled upon the arena, its crumbling stone walls glowing faintly under the moonlight. Inside, Lucius and his men found something chilling. 2 figures hanging from ropes in the center of the arena. One man stood on a raised stone pedestal, muscles straining as he held onto the ropes that bound his wrists, his face twisted in defiance. The other man hung limp, his head bowed in deathly silence, his feet barely brushing the ground. "This place reeks of the gods," muttered Decimus, Lucius's closest companion. "We should leave before they notice us." But Lucius, always skeptical of such superstitions, stepped closer. He noticed strange carvings etched into the pedestal, ancient symbols not of Roman origin but of something far older. The whispers began then, faint at first like the rustle of leaves, but they grew louder. The air grew heavy, thick with the metallic scent of blood. The ropes swayed, though no wind stirred the forest. Suddenly, the man on the pedestal opened his eyes. They glowed an unnatural gold, piercing through the darkness. "Why do you disturb our rest?" he bellowed, his voice resonating with a mix of human anguish and something otherworldly. The soldiers froze in terror as the limp body next to him began to rise, its head snapping upright. Its hollow eyes burned with the same golden glow. The dead man spoke, his voice echoing unnaturally. "We were chosen. We were sacrificed for the god Silvanus. Now all who trespass will join us." The ground trembled as cracks snaked across the arena floor, releasing a foul stench. Shadows poured from the cracks, swirling around the soldiers, forming the shapes of long-dead gladiators. They bore rusted swords and spears, their skeletal faces locked in eternal agony. Lucius barked orders, but the men panicked, their swords useless against the spectral warriors. One by one, the soldiers were dragged into the darkness, their screams echoing through the arena. Lucius fought valiantly, his blade slicing through the air, but his strikes met nothing but empty shadows. The glowing man on the pedestal stepped forward, his restraints now broken. "You have walked onto cursed ground," he said, his voice softer but no less menacing. "This arena demands tribute, blood for the god of the forest." Lucius fell to his knees as the shadows encircled him. He realized too late that the curse was unbreakable. The arena had been a trap for centuries, drawing in the living to fuel its eternal hunger. By dawn, the arena was empty once more, its eerie silence returned. The forest around it grew thicker, as if shielding its dark secret. And within the arena, 2 new figures now hung from ropes in the center, one defiant, the other limp, forever part of Silvanus's eternal ritual. Her husband was dead, and it was the best Christmas present she would ever have. She stood over the lifeless body, sprawled at her feet, and smiled. "Ha ha! Merry Christmas, Joseph! You're sleeping so peacefully, dreaming of Santa Claus?" She lingered, thinking of the months of planning that had culminated in one swift blow with a poker. From upstairs, she heard a child's cries. "Carol, she's awake." She hurried upstairs and opened the door to a small bedroom. "Carol, what's the matter, dear?" "Did Santa Claus come yet, Mommy?" "Did he?" "No, dear, not yet. It's not time. So you go back to sleep." "Can I see him, Mommy? Can I see him when he comes?" "I'll see, dear. Now you be a good little girl and go right to sleep, or Santa Claus won't come at all right?" "All right, Mommy. Night." She remained until her daughter was sleeping again, then returned downstairs. She stepped over her husband's body and moved to the table. Casually, she lit a cigarette and inhaled. "You are such a mouse, Joseph. You will never know how wonderful it is to be free of you at last." There was no hurry. She had planned too long and too well. There were no neighbors within miles, and she had all night to dispose of the body. She thought of the insurance, drifted across the room and turned on the radio. The music floated through the room, Christmas carols. She hummed softly and looked again at the corpse. The stained poker lay nearby. She picked up the poker, fondled it, cleaned it, and set it in its place by the fire. She turned and gazed at the gaily decorated Christmas tree and the presents beneath it. Now I will never know whether or not Joseph would have liked that tie I bought for him. Oh well. Abruptly, the mantel clock chimed the hour. It was time. Oh, it's 11. Time to get rid of Joseph, and Carol will be all right until I get back. She crossed the room to turn off the radio, then stopped, listening. Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. We have just received a report from the Worldwide News Bureau that a homicidal maniac has escaped from the state hospital for the insane. He has brutally murdered 4 women, and all citizens are warned to remain off the streets. This man is extremely dangerous. We repeat, he's extremely dangerous. Another report has just been handed to me. Here is a description of the escaped maniac. He's 6 feet 3 inches tall, 210 pounds, with dark eyes and shaggy black hair. It is reported that he is now wearing a Santa Claus costume, which he had taken from a man in the village of Pleasantville. Pleasantville? My God, that's just south of here. He's believed to be headed north. Police officials state that he will not harm children and will only injure men if he is provoked. It is said that he is obsessed with the killing of women. All 4 women he has already murdered were viciously disfigured. Oh, my Lord. All women are warned to remain indoors. This man is extremely dangerous. Further bulletins will be brought to you as soon as they are received. Stay tuned for now. My God, I can't take a chance on leaving now. Yet I have to get rid of Joseph's body. I hadn't figured on anything like this. Still, Carol will be okay if I leave her. The radio said he won't harm children, and I have to get rid of Joseph. I'll go. She tiptoed to the window and peered through the darkness. She could discern the costume, the white fur trim. My God, and it's him! In a fit of sudden panic, she rushed to the telephone and snatched up the receiver to call the police. She stopped, and an icy fear clutched her heart. I can't call the police. They would find Joseph's body. Oh, good heavens, what will I do? Slowly, she lowered the receiver. She stared at the body at the front door. The house was as quiet as death. Maybe he will go away, but I would better put Joseph's body in the closet in case Carol woke up. The front doorknob rattled loudly. She moved away from the corpse to the door. He's trying to get in. He isn't going to go away. He wants me. In the silence, she heard him stomp from the porch. From within, she followed the sound of his footsteps crunching in the snow. He's going around the side of the house. He is going to the back door. Madly, she raced through the house to the back door. She locked and bolted it nervously. There! She heard his steps clumping onto the back porch, and she stood away from the door, fearfully watching the knob as it was turned and rattled. Again, she listened in terror as the footsteps left the porch and moved through the snow. The windows. He will try the windows. Frantically, she rushed from window to window, making certain they were all locked, all the blinds lowered. The radio announcement thundered in her mind. She shuddered convulsively. I have got to hurry. I've got to hurry. One of them may be unlocked. While locking all the windows, she noticed Joseph on the floor. A strange expression flicked across her face. For a moment, she seemed bewildered. Joseph! Heavens, I've got to get him out of sight. If Carol ever woke up and came downstairs, she started dragging the body across the floor to the closet, then stopped and looked at the front door, then at the windows. She dropped the body. The windows! I've locked all the windows, but he could break them. He'll come inside and kill me. She hurried down to the cellar, stumbling and almost falling in the dim light. She swished her hand across her forehead, wiping away the drops of perspiration. There was lumber in the cellar. Joseph was always buying and picking up pieces of lumber, and silently she thanked him. She gathered as many boards as she could, grabbed a hammer and a handful of nails. Loaded with her burden, she clumsily climbed the stairs and entered the living room. She saw the body. Oh, I still haven't put him away in the closet. If Carol ever saw. She put down the boards, the hammer, the nails, and now, trembling, she lifted Joseph and began once more to drag him to the closet. She stopped suddenly, remembering the breakable windows and the fiend somewhere outside. She dropped the body, picked up the lumber, the nails, the hammer, and started boarding the windows. From the rear of the house, she heard a pounding on the back door. She dropped the hammer and the nails and snatched up the phone to call for help. Then she remembered the body on the floor. She let the phone slip from her grasp and tumble into its cradle. She picked up the hammer, the lumber, and all the little nails and finished boarding up the windows. She finished the windows and wondered what the maniac was doing. Then she remembered the dead body and went back to drag it into the closet. The cellar door was locked and she ran upstairs and checked the doors. She checked the windows, made sure the body was in the closet, and raced up to the attic to make sure it was all closed up. She went over all the windows again, checking to see if they were all boarded up. She made sure the body was in the closet, then went down to the cellar to check the cellar door. After she checked the attic, she checked the locks on all the windows on the second floor and thought of the fiend and all the insurance. She went to her daughter's room. Carol, my God, she's gone. The room was empty, and she tore the bedclothes from the empty bed, slammed the door of the empty closet, and checked the lock on the empty room's window. It's locked! She's still here! She's still in the house! Carol, where are you? Here I am, Mommy. Here I am, downstairs. She rushed headlong from the empty room, clattered frantically down the stairs, and stopped. Look, Mommy! Look, Santa Claus is here! I let him in!